too. We've only got capital to last a month, maybe 2. If we can't find investors by then, we're gonna have to lay people off.
Mom, Dad, come kiss me goodnight.
I know,
Be
I
right
know.
there.
We've got to land this, okay?
Did you hear Dad? He sounded really upset. What was that? Was it a bear? It's a bear!
There are no bears in San Francisco.
I saw a really hairy guy. He looked like a bear.
Oh, I'm so jumpy. My nerves are shot.
Ew, I don't want to hear about your nerves.
I'll tell you what it is. This move has been a bust.
That's what I've been telling you guys. There are at least 37 things for Riley to be scared of right now.
The smell alone is enough to make her gag.
I can't believe Mom and Dad moved us here.
Look, I get it. You guys have concerns, but we've been through worse. Tell you what, let's make a list of all the things Riley should be happy about.
Fine. Let's see. This house stinks. Our room stinks.
Pizza is weird here.
Our friends are back home.
And all of our stuff is in the missing van.
Oh, come on. It could be worse.
Yeah, Joy. We could be lying on the dirty floor in a bag.
Okay, I admit it. We had a rough start. But think of all the good things
No,
that...
Joy. There's absolutely no reason for Riley to be happy right now. Let us handle
I
this.
say we skip school tomorrow and lock ourselves in the bedroom.
We have no clean clothes. I mean, no one should see us.
Yeah, we could cry until we can't breathe.
We should lock the door and scream that curse word we know. It's a good one.
Now, hold on. Look, we all have our off days, you know.
Hi, honey.
The Mom Bad News train is pulling in. Toot toot.
Still no moving van. Now they're saying it won't be here till Tuesday. Can you believe it?
Toot toot toot.
Where's Dad?
On the phone. This new venture is keeping him pretty busy.
I rest my case.
Oh, your dad's a little stressed. You know, about getting his new company up and running.
Now, for a few well-placed withering scowls.
I guess all I really want to say is thank you.
Huh?
You know, through all this confusion, you've stayed... Well, you've stayed our happy girl. Your dad's under a lot of pressure. But if you and I can keep smiling, it would be a big help. We can do that for him, right?
Whoa. Well. Yeah, sure.
What did we do to deserve you? Mwah. Sweet dreams.
Good night.
Well, you can't argue with Mom. Happy
Can't
it
argue
is.
with Mom.
Team happy.
Let's do this.
Sounds great.
Totally behind you, Joy.
Looks like we're going into REM. I've got dream duty, so I'll take care of
I
sending
love
these
being
to
on a
long
team.
term. Great day today, guys. All sleep well, Team Happy. All right, what's on tonight, Dream Production?
Well, this is it. A new place.
Come live with me, Riley.
Somebody order a broccoli pizza?
I'm organic.
Ugh, no. Who is in charge of programming down there? I know I'm not supposed to do this, but... We are not going to end the day like this.
Inside Out. Any of you guys ever seen that movie? No? So, so let me explain. So John has been after me to see this movie. And I said, I'll get to it. Yeah, he goes, you know, I don't like cartoons, I told him. You know, I just don't like cartoons. And he's like, you gotta see this movie. Every time we talked this week, he kind of checked up if I saw the movie. I said, my wife and I are gonna see the movie last night, and we did. And one thing about John is he can see the wisdom in a lot of things where maybe other guys don't see it. So that was Riley, that little girl. And in fact, you'll be introduced to some of Riley's emotions during this lesson. There was joy, sadness, anger, fear, and disgust. And we'll be talking about that in this lesson. First of all, I want to welcome you. I want to say congratulations for being here again today. You know, really, I really mean that. I mean, this does take a little bit of a commitment, and congratulations for you to be here. I'm really proud of you guys. So they say life is 10% of what happens to you and 90% on how we react. John's going to talk about that today. And when you hear some of these emotions, some of these characteristics, You might say, I know, that's Nathan. Or you might say, you know, that's Tony. What I encourage you to do today is look for yourself in some of these characteristics. Look and say, instead of pointing the finger like we all kind of do, say, you know what, I have some of those characteristics. Now they say again, it's 90% on how you react to it, but how are we supposed to react? Give me some data how I can help these challenges that I come up with. How can you help me see these things? And John's going to address some of those things today that what he came up with and how you can have the ammunition to fight some of those emotions. You know, I talk to a lot of guys, and I say to guys, you know, you need to introduce yourself to yourself, because some people don't know who they are, and that's a direct statement. Do you know who you are? Today we're going to learn a lot about who you are and strategies, how you can face and how you can tackle and how you can change some of these things. So this is a valuable lesson. There's certain parts of it that you really need to take some notes. So let's get to it. Please welcome my Rabbi, John Bell.
That applause is kind of fading, by the way, just so you know. All right, here's what I believe, and I believe this kind of my whole life. This has been such a passion and a burden of mine. And that is that deep in the core of every man is an amazing man. Do you believe that about yourself? Like, when you look in the mirror, do you ever say to yourself, "You're amazing"? Does that sound egotistical? It shouldn't, because that's how God feels about you. God looks at you and says, "You're amazing. You're amazing." Now, the world and the evil one, and sometimes a voice inside of you will say the opposite. You know, you're a schlemiel. You're a loser. You're not going to make it. How could you do that? But God all the time is saying, listen, you're amazing. I tell people that one of the greatest things about the gospel is the gospel, if you really understand the gospel, you will have what you've been looking for your whole life. Psychiatrists call it, or psychologists call it, self-worth. Right? Ever hear that? And here's what the gospel says. The gospel says, you are worth my son dying for you. That's how amazing I think of you. So I want you guys to kind of have that mindset of, you know, when what the Bible talks about as righteousness, you know, the righteousness of God has been revealed from heaven. That righteousness has been given to you, and the God of the universe, the God who created everything, has gone to great lengths so that not just you'll have a relationship with him, but that you will become the person that you were meant to become all along. Okay? So probably close the door to the bedroom or the bathroom, but stand in front of the mirror today and look at yourself and say, you know, you're amazing. You're amazing. But you're amazing because your Father says that you're amazing. This, I love that twice it happens, at least in Scripture, where a voice from heaven comes down and the Father says, "This is my Son, in whom I am well pleased." And yes, that's Jesus, but it's also you. So we're talking about how to be amazing, how to bring to the surface from the core that amazing man that God intended for you to be. And we said the first thing, and I think this is absolutely critical, is that you need to be a sticky friend. You need to have extreme loyalty. Hopefully from last week's lesson, maybe you thought about some people that you need to connect or reconnect with. But you want to practice that. You want to be that loyal, extreme friend. And there's a definition on here. Take a look at it. A sticky friend is a man who is able to enter into and maintain a deep, transparent, trustworthy, reciprocal, loyal, mutual, and covenantal, like David and Jonathan, a covenantal relationship with other men over a long period of time. I was talking to Mark this week in his office, and I said, we were talking about friendship, and one of the problems that men have, the reason they don't have friendships, probably the number one reason, is their fear of rejection. Will this person actually accept me and reciprocate with me? And don't be afraid to try. There are plenty of men out there that'll reject you, and there are a lot of jerks in the world, but there's a lot of men who feel exactly like you, and you just don't know it. Sticky friends will be spontaneous, bring joy to one another just by being together. Did you practice this week your eyes lighting up? Did you practice that? Here's how you should have known that you practiced it. Your wife was like, "What happened to you?" What's that? What are you so happy about? But when you start doing that, you bring that kind of joy to your family. And they kind of respond to that. They will see the best and bring out the best in one another. They will be brothers as God intended for brothers to be. Brotherhood extends far beyond biology, doesn't it? I mean, it has to do with this brotherhood of man that we have with one another. It's just so critical. This week we're going to talk about being inquisitive. And here's what I want to stir up in you this morning. I'm going to go through. I'm not going to hit every point this morning, especially the personal development plan. But I want to stir up in you this morning a sense of curiosity. A sense of curiosity. Are you curious? Are you inquisitive? Do you want to understand? Here's an inquisitive student. An inquisitive student is a man on a lifelong journey. Life's a journey, isn't it? Sometimes I say life's a book. And right now I'm in a bad chapter. Right? But here's what I know. This bad chapter is coming to an end, and there's another chapter coming. And it'll be okay. And God's writing this story. Actually, according to Ephesians 2:10, life is a poem. We actually are a poem. And we can think thoughts with God. So it's a lifelong journey to discover the truth and wisdom about, as Dean said, about himself. I think it was Socrates who said, "Know thyself," right? Like, you have to be able to explain you to you. the people he's called to love and protect. So I'm always trying to get inside of my wife's head. Huh? Good luck with that. No, I want to know the interior. I want to know the interior map of her brain. Because we see things completely differently. In fact, if we go to a party and you interview us afterwards, you'll think we were at a different party. Right? So I'm just so how did you arrive at that conclusion? Typically at a party, we'll get on the way home, she'll say, "You shouldn't have said that." And I'll say, "I shouldn't have said what?" She goes, "Well, I think you hurt that person when you said that." I go, "No, I didn't." Then I'll call them up and I'll say, "When I said that, I didn't mean anything." They go, "That's okay." And I go, "She's right. She was right." So I want to understand myself. I want to understand the people I love. The people who are draining, right? There are people who are draining, very draining people. And the people who are predatory. And by the way, I want to help them change. I want to help them grow. Even the predators, I want to help the predators grow. But it actually takes a group to change a predator. You can't do it by yourself. As well as answers to life in general. Here's the way I define. This is what wisdom is. Wisdom is connecting the dots or putting the puzzle together so that everything fits. That's what I'm trying to do. Is I'm trying to connect the dots because I know the dots are connected, and I'm trying to put the puzzle together. There are 3 realms of learning. I don't know if you've thought about this, but there are 3 realms of learning. There's what we're talking about mostly in these sessions is the very first realm. It's relational learning. And guys have one of the reasons that we don't develop as men is we don't pay a lot of attention to relational learning. And relational learning it's what they now call EQ, emotional quotient. And it's emotional quotient essentially, I've got words on here, but here's where you get your emotional quotient. You download it from other people. Did you know that? If you were blessed and you grew up in a home where your mom had high EQ and then your dad followed through with that, you didn't know it. Nobody explained it to you, but you just automatically downloaded that. And then you downloaded it from your siblings, and then you downloaded it from your friends. And one of the reasons you need friends now is because you continue to download it. And you want to see another man who handles anger well. I love in Mark chapter 3, this is the only place in Scripture where it says Jesus was angry. It actually says he was indignant. And imagine the disciples as they're watching Jesus. He's indignant because the legalists are trying to catch him to see if he'll heal a man on the Sabbath. And he's so upset that bothers them. You know what Jesus does when he gets angry? He heals a man's hand. Imagine what that looked like, especially to Peter, who could go off. Peter was like, "Whoa, what is that? You mean when you get angry, you do something good?" See, that he was downloading there. That's what it is. Second one is the one that the West is kind of left brain dominant. So this one we understand. It's logical, rational learning, which is a step-by-step process on the left side of the brain that can formulate a narrative for the past, present, future, for understanding and planning. This is called intelligence quotient. This is IQ. And that's the one that, that's the one you gotta get paid for. Here's what I say to people. They hire you for your IQ, and they promote you for your EQ. So if you want to get promoted, you got to develop that relational learning. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on IQ. You know what that is. It's logic and reason. And by the way, what people who don't believe in God do with their IQ is they suppress the truth. Because the truth is evident. Like, take a look at the world. You think this is by accident? Really? Because you had to be educated into that kind of stupidity. And then the third is spiritual learning. And spiritual learning is, so we typically say there's reason and there's revelation. And revelation is a gift of God. It's God speaking into your life, into your spirit, and God says, here's essentially the first time you discover it, this is what it feels like or sounds like. There's a whole world that exists that you know nothing about, and it's the invisible realm. There's the kingdoms of this world which you see, and then there's this other kingdom that actually, this invisible realm produced the visible realm. And you can only see that realm with the eyes of your heart. You can only see that realm by faith. Okay? So those are the three different realms, and you and I should be engaged in a regular process of learning. Let me go through quickly the 5 key components to learning. And this first one is the most important one, and by the way, we've talked a lot about the right brain. The right brain is where your curiosity comes from. Your identity comes from your right brain. So if you have a stable identity, it's because you have a joyful identity. But the very first thing that you need is curiosity. Curiosity, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. Then observing. So I want to know, and then I want to see. Asking questions. What were the 3 hardest questions in the world, Mark? Or 3 hardest? You can give them that. Yeah. I was wrong. I'm sorry. And Worcestershire sauce. 3 hardest things to say. So observing. So I'm going through life with my eyes wide open. I'm not doing just this. I mean, sometimes I'm doing this. By the way, the left brain can focus on one thing, like the right brain can focus on the landscape. The left brain can solve mathematical problems. The right brain I can look at all of you in your faces and take it all in. So I'm observing, asking questions, listening. Listening isn't waiting for your turn to talk. I'm really listening. I'm paying attention. I tell men, when your wife is telling you something and she's telling you your story, 3 magic words. Tell me more. She'll keel over. Right? Tell me more. Because I know what you're doing. You're kind of like waiting, right? The other 3 magic words are, you're probably right. And then clarifying. When a person tells you something, say to them afterwards, now, let me make sure that I heard you correctly. This is what I heard. Are you curious? I'm just like a naturally curious person. It's just the way God, like Dean said. I mean, I watched Inside Out, and I was like, I gotta watch this again. I'm just naturally curious. I hope you were supposed to be naturally curious. Here's what kills curiosity: a desire for control. If you have to control things, you know, if you can't risk a little bit, you're not going to be curious. Like, again, tell me more. So let's just go through. Number one, they listen without judgment. In Romans chapter 2, the first 10 verses, there's a whole description of judgmental people. They're self-righteous. They look at others and they put them in a box. They categorize them. And I think, to the shame of Christianity and the church, we're viewed as judgmental people instead of seeking to understand. They listen without judgment. They ask lots of questions. One of my favorite characters on TV was Columbo. Do you remember Columbo? He would always arrive at the solution by asking lots of questions. They love surprises. There are guys that go, no surprises. I love surprises. I love surprises. Some of them aren't comfortable, but God always has surprises. You know, God has designed your life. You know there's surprises out there waiting for you. They're fully present. When they're listening, curious people, when they're listening, they're all there. They aren't afraid of being wrong. They aren't afraid of being wrong. Like, I guess I was wrong. They practice intentional pauses. So one of the things that I practice is I will take some time every month and just like meditate on things I know and I don't know, and things I'd like to learn. So I take a pause in life. Otherwise life just kind of rushes by, doesn't it? They aren't afraid to say, I don't know. I don't know. I was once with a friend, and we were in this like high-end restaurant, and there was something on the menu, and he said, are you going to have that? I said, I don't even know what it is. I don't even know what it is. It was some kind of cheese that I'd never seen before. And then finally, they don't let the past decide their future. So, in other words, they recover well. They move past. Now, the next part, the personal development plan, it talks about personal development, personal effectiveness, personal development styles or skills. Those are questions for you, and I'm not going to run through that list, okay? I'm going to finish up this way. Final thoughts this morning. I want you as men to always understand the difference between identity, calling, and assignment. Identity, calling, and assignment. So a lot of guys, when they retire, they lose their identity because their identity was in their assignment. So they don't have that assignment anymore, so they don't have any purpose anymore. When you lose purpose, you lose it all, right? So you have two identities. Number one, you have your identity in Christ. And then number two, you have this unique personality that God made, and you're to express that personality in life. Maybe you're an extrovert, maybe you're an introvert, lots of ways. So there's your spiritual identity, which nobody can ever affect. Your identity in Christ is set. And you should always know that, and you should review that. Number two, your personality. And then your calling is what you do regularly. Like my calling is to teach. Like if whatever I'm studying, you're going to hear about it. Because it's what I do. The demonstration of calling is in the life of Joseph. Wherever you drop Joseph, whether it was with his brothers, whether it was in the house of Potiphar, whether it was in prison, or whether it was on the throne in Egypt, he was administrating. You know why? That was his calling. That's what he did. and you have a calling. And then you're going to have assignments. And assignments come and go, right? So don't ever lock your identity and your calling into your assignment, because every assignment ends. And then the other question, the last thing I want to talk to you about is, who do you worship? You cannot not worship. Everyone worships. And here's what you should know. Whatever you worship is what you're becoming. Some people get upset because they say, why does God demand that we worship him? Well, here's what God knows, because he designed us. Whatever you worship is what you become. So the reason that we're to worship God is he wants us to be like him. Okay? So, be sticky, be inquisitive.
Times, it's stand by, is one of John's favorites, written by Carol Lynn Pearson. I had not read it before until John loaned it to me, and I'm going to share it with you today. Before I do that, however, for those of you that are here, which I hope is all of us, mentally it takes a while sometimes to get here. If you're a coffee drinker, it usually helps a little bit, but just to wake up. But I want to share something that, having been now alive for almost 69 years, I have watched a number of men show up at men's ministry, and I have noticed something that in their development happens differently than the world. And I will tell you, assuredly, that the investment of time that you make in this, you are actually getting ahead of the game. You will come across lots of men in your life today even and throughout the week, and they're missing the context of life in a lot of ways. And you're here and you're getting a context development course that other men aren't getting. And there are benefits and payoffs to that, so thanks for making the effort to come. All right, the lesson. On Robert's first day at school, he had a wonderful time. He swung on the swings, he sang with the other children, he listened to the stories, he loved sitting at a desk and smelling new paper and touching new pencils, and his teacher was very, very nice. One day, Robert's teacher said, "Children, it's time for our lesson. We are now going to learn how to solve a problem. 1 + 1 equals what?" Well, Robert was very curious and listened carefully while the teacher explained. And then he raised his hand and said, "The answer is 2. "Right," said the teacher, and Robert was very happy because he had solved the problem. The next day, when the teacher started talking about solving a problem, Robert just stared out the window at a bird that was hopping on a nearby branch because he already knew how to solve a problem. But when his eyes went to the blackboard after the bird flew away, he saw written there, 2 + 2. What? Robert looked at his teacher in surprise. "Another problem?" "Oh, Robert," the teacher said, twinkling as if she knew some marvelous secret. "This is just the beginning. There are lots and lots of problems." Robert sighed, and then he listened as the teacher explained, and he raised his hand and he said, 4. "Right," said the teacher, and Robert smiled because now he had solved 2 problems. Every day when Robert went to school, there were more and more problems to solve. And sometimes Robert said to himself, "This is not fun." But his teacher told him he had to do it anyway because what he was there for was to learn. And he could have fun at recess and lots of fun after school. And she said, though Robert did not believe her, that after he had solved lots of problems, he would feel even happier than when he slid down the slippery slide. So one by one, Robert solved the problems, and after he solved them, he smiled, and then he moved up a grade. And then one day the teacher said, "We are now going to do story problems." "Oh boy," said Robert, "this sounds like fun." He liked stories, so he listened carefully. If you were going outside playing, said the teacher, and you have 3 cars in one truck, and Joey comes along and grabs 2 cars in the truck, how many times should you hit Joey? Robert thought and thought. 2 times, he said. Wrong, said the teacher. 3 times, said Robert. Wrong, said the teacher, and she looked at him with soft, expectant eyes. Robert puzzled over this for a little while, and then his hand shot up and he said brightly, I know, no times. Right, said the teacher, and Robert smiled because he had solved yet another problem. Robert grew bigger and bigger, and so did his problems. Oh, he loved recess, and he played ball and roller skated with friends after school and had the best time, and the teacher saw to it that they sang and drew pictures and had lots of fun in class. But always there came the problems. And sometimes he slumped down at his desk and said, I am not enjoying this. Why are you punishing me with all these problems? And Robert's teacher, now twinkling as if the secret were even more wonderful, answered, Oh, Robert, I am not punishing you. It's just that you have moved up a grade and are ready for harder problems. And here comes one now. And Robert held onto his desk with both hands and squeezed his eyes shut and listened. Robert, if you ride your bicycle 2 blocks east and 3 blocks north and you fall off and break one leg, is it your fault or the bicycle's fault? Or the sidewalks? Or is it your parents' fault because they gave you the bicycle for your birthday last August? And do you ever ride a bicycle again? And what do you do while you're lying in bed and can't go out to play? Robert worked on that one for a long time, and it was not fun at all. But finally he got it right, and his teacher smiled. Oh, Robert was very proud of himself, and he smiled too. And the teacher moved him up another grade. One day, as Robert was gazing out the window at the raindrops that were making puddles on the sidewalk and thinking what a great splash he could make, he heard his teacher say, Robert, if your family moved to a small house in a big city and you had to leave behind 2 aquariums and 1 dog and your best friend... Oh, no, interrupted Robert. I don't want that problem. Give me a different problem. But I can't, said the teacher. This is your problem, and you must solve it. So Robert worked on it and cried a little, and finally, after some time had passed, he found that he had solved the problem, and he smiled, and it felt good. And the teacher moved him up another grade. Robert had a long summer vacation and played and played and played, and when it was time to go back to school, he was ready. For a while, Robert was given some very simple problems, like, Robert, if you take 5 minutes longer in the shower and 4 minutes longer on breakfast, how long will it take you to walk to school because the bus has already left? But one day, Robert could hardly breathe as he heard the teacher say, Robert, if you were a teenager and you were not doing well in school and you were not popular and you had pimples all over your face and your parents were getting a divorce and you thought it must be your fault and you felt that life was the pits, would you, A, take drugs to make the pain go away, B, kill yourself, C, hate your father, or D, think of another solution? Oh, no, said Robert, hiding under his desk. I can't do that one. I like the problems about oranges and bananas in the grocery store or missing the bus, but this one is too hard. Why are you punishing me? I'm sorry, Robert, said the teacher kindly. You're a big boy now, and you have big boy problems. Now come out from under the desk and solve it. You are here to learn. So Robert slowly came out and studied the problem and frowned and even dropped a few tears onto his wooden desk. He didn't get it right the first time, but the teacher was patient and saw to it that Robert had some extra loving attention. And at last, Robert leaned back and said, Whew, that was a tough one. Oh, it was indeed, Robert, said the teacher, but you solved it, and I'm proud of you. Robert had thought he might never smile again, but finally he did smile. And on the way home from school, he noticed that the sky was bluer than he ever remembered seeing it. And he moved up to the next grade. Robert's teacher gave him all kinds of problems, and eventually he learned it was no use to hide under his desk or to tell her no or to yell. They were his problems, and he would have to solve them. And sometimes a new one came before the last one was finished. Oh, there was recess, and there were weekends, and there were long holidays, but always the bell would ring, and there was his teacher with a new problem. And as soon as he got it solved, you guessed it, he was moved up to the next grade, and it felt good. Robert, if you had 7 dates with one girl and fell in love with her, and 4 months later asked her to marry you, and she said no, and you felt like a complete zero. Robert, if you really wanted to go to college and it cost $5,000 and you only had $2,000. Robert, if your wife, who was really a very good woman, had 10 habits that drove you absolutely crazy and was 30 pounds overweight and spent half her time on things that were important to her but not to you. Robert, if you had 3 children and one of them was born with a birth defect that added to your sorrows because it subtracted from her possibilities and divided your attention and multiplied the problems of caring for your family. Robert, if you knew that your boss at work was cheating 45 people in 7 states in 12 different ways, and if you said anything, there would be a 90% chance you would lose the best job you ever had. Robert, if you woke up 14 mornings in a row wondering if it were worth it to get out of bed because you felt like you've been giving 100% to 24 people and getting only 30% in return, and you felt yourself going down and down and down, and your brother's house went up in flames, and your wife's mother was in a terrible accident, and your daughter wanted to marry a jerk, and the pollution thickened and the ozone thinned. Robert sat at his desk for years and years and did his best, and everyone who loved him gathered around and encouraged him, but they knew they could not do Robert's homework for him, for those were his problems. And they each had problems of their own, and Robert encouraged them, but the only problems he could really only really work on were his. And when he couldn't solve a problem, no matter how he tried, the teacher was very patient and smiled and said, "Oh, that's all right, Robert. We'll come back to that one some other time." Gradually, Robert stopped saying, "Oh, why are you punishing me with all these problems?" For he knew that he was there to learn. And he learned that learning made him happy. And he found that he smiled a lot. And he moved up from one grade to the next. One day, when Robert was very old and sometimes had dozed off in the classroom, the teacher startled him by saying, "Robert, if your body had 3 heart attacks and 1 missing kidney, and you got weaker and weaker until you could hardly breathe, how much would you have loved? And who would remember you after you were gone?" Robert swallowed hard and sat up straight at his desk and worked on it. And then suddenly he realized that all the lessons that he had been learning all of his life had really been only one lesson. That all the problems that he had been working on all of his life had really been only one problem, this problem. Robert, how much do you love? Finally, he leaned back and sighed and smiled. And the teacher smiled. And Robert moved up to the next grade. Something for us to ponder this morning, and perhaps you can see yourself in some way in that story. As to John's lesson this morning, I have made most of my living asking questions. I've been involved in talk radio for a number of years, and You can do the talking or you can do the listening. And if you're going to have guests, you better learn to do the listening. I would recommend, for those of you that would like an interesting kind of a book to read about that kind of focuses on this, it's called One Good Question. One Good Question. It's by Ken Coleman. Ken is also a talk radio host. He's also the MC at the Catalyst Leadership Conference. He writes in his foreword, if you could sit down with people you most admire and ask just one question, what would you ask? Great questions are often the keys that unlock possibilities for human advancement. The right questions uncover truths we might not otherwise know. He has interviews in this book with John Maxwell, Jim Collins, Dan Cathy, of course, head of Chick-fil-A, Bob Buford. And I would just encourage you, I'd put that on the recommended reading list. One Good Question by Ken Coleman. Of course, you could ask good questions, but as we also heard in our lesson today, you'd better be a good listener if you're going to learn. Proverbs 4, verse 7 says this, the beginning of wisdom is this, get wisdom, and whatever you get insight. How do you do that? You ask questions. So let's practice that skill on being inquisitive. All right, it is that time, friends, for you to divide up into your groups, whether it's 2 or 3 or whoever. If you're here by yourself and you don't see the same people, just try to jump in with a couple of others, and if they kick you out, then you know that's not the right group for you, all right? But otherwise, do your discussion questions and stay as long as you like. Get more coffee if you want, or a donut out back. And thanks, Dean, for bringing the donuts today. And thank you for coming and moving a few steps forward.